O'Reilly. You need parts? O'Reilly Auto Parts has parts. Need them fast? We've got fast. No matter what you need, we have thousands of professional parts people doing their part to make sure you have it. Product availability. Just one part that makes O'Reilly stand apart. The professional parts people.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. You ever get that feeling the walls closing in, the concrete jungle suffocating you? You crave some wide open spaces, the chance to connect with nature, maybe in a spot all your own. Well, head over to land.com. They've got ranches, forests, mountains, streams, you name it. Search by acreage. You can search by location. You can search by the kind of hunting and fishing you're dreaming of. Land.com. It is where the adventure begins.
Oh, hey, everybody. Episode 91 coming right at you. Me and Phil, Bozeman, Montana. It's cold, it's snowy, it's almost Christmas, but we're still having a good time. We hope you are too. This episode is full of stuff. Some of it is good. Some of it is negative. That is because we were reviewing the reaction to episode 89 with Carolyn Finney, where we talked about hunting while black in America. That was a conversation that you should have listened to. We'll stop now if you haven't. And we're back. But we're going to read some of your reaction, the good and the bad, because we are a fair trade podcast. Fair trade doesn't really...
Nope, that's close though.
That's close. We're going to go with it. We're a fair trade podcast. So we got to that. We got a not-so-sharp moment for you. We got some other random things that we're going to clean up. Eric Hall returns to the podcast. And I went to the Smithsonian, Phil, to look at some bones and stuff.
I'm jealous.
Yeah, you are jealous. I learned everything there is to know about paleoanthropology over a wonderful visit with Brianna Pobiner at the Smithsonian. So that's the interview portion of the show. All right, enjoy episode 91.
I guess I grew up on an older road. A pedal to the metal, always did what I was told. Until I found out that my brand new clothes came secondhand from the rich kids next door. When I grew up fast, I guess I grew up mean. There's 1,000 things inside my head I wish I ain't seen. And now I just wander through a real bad dream, or feeling like I'm coming apart at the seams. But thank you, Jack Daniels. Oh, number 7.
Hey, everybody. Episode number 91. What's up? And what's up, Phil?
Oh, not much. Just getting into the Christmas spirit here.
I know.
At the MeatEater offices.
I know. We just sang a little, what would you call that? 12 days of what?
Well, I don't want to spoil it.
Oh, let's not spoil it.
But we can give a little tease. We're planning a big MeatEater holiday Christmas extravaganza podcast episode. So we were just recording a little something for that people will be hearing soon.
Do you have any Christmas traditions, Philip?
Yeah, just the pretty standard.
Yeah. I'm not really into Christmas. I'm not gonna lie to you. Not really into Christmas.
Oh, I love it.
I always feel like it's just more work for everybody.
It's more work. It's more money.
Thanksgiving, you can just relax. Like all you gotta do is eat and relax and watch football and then go hunt.
I love the lights. I love the smells. I love the food of Christmas.
You're a real sap for it, aren't you?
I'm a sucker.
All right. Well, we're gonna move through the year. Now we have to make a special THC announcement. This is more kind of blocking and tackling, a little cleanup here. I said, I think a couple episodes ago, or maybe in last episode, Phil, that I'm having a child.
Yes, you are.
My wife is having it. I will be there. So we're, as a way to let you guys know what's coming in the future, we're going to do some best of podcasts in the month of January while I rear my new son, hopefully, if all goes well.
Yes.
So I'm going to leave Phil with a lot of my favorite moments from the last 90-some episodes of THC. Now, you are very welcome to contribute to the best of. So if you have a favorite interview, a favorite moment of the podcast, I can think of a few right now. I can think of Wyman Menzer crashing a plane. I can think of Barry Gilbert trying to leave the podcast studio.
Oh, you're going to make me listen to that again?
Of course I will. I can think of Cam Haines loving The Bachelor, Steve Rinella in Game of Thrones. I can think of a lot of moments that I want to include in the best of THC coming up here in January. But we're going to need your input as well. So send it in to thc@meateater.com if you have something for the best of. And do me a favor, in the subject line, just put the best of, so I'll know, because there's a lot of emails coming in. I want to make sure I catch as many of them as humanly possible. Right, Phil?
Yeah.
I just, when I'm moving, when I'm transitioning now, I just say, right, Phil?
Mm-hmm. And then I say, uh-huh.
And I say, now, and we move on. Now, we're going to move on to some of your emails. And we did a controversial podcast, Phil.
Some people think so, apparently.
Yeah, like 4 of them.
Uh-huh. Wow.
It's a strong contingent of people. But we did receive episode 89 that we did with Carolyn Finney. And we've said it in the podcast, we knew that there would be some people that were, triggered by that, Philip.
Yep.
Turns out there were a few. And I imagine that we should say, we'll give voice to some of the negativity here, but many of you wrote in with positive comments. Many of you wrote in lauding us for kind of expanding the conversation. And
I would just like to say that in my 6 months that I have been here, it has been my favorite episode that you have done so far.
Damn. And that's Phil, the engineer, talking. He's listened to a lot. The poor guy has to listen to and edit and put sounds in all these podcasts from the Meat Eater crew, and so he's listened to a lot. I thought listening back to it, I wanted to listen back to it because I knew I wasn't going to get the whole thing right. Even putting it out, I knew there was going to be some things about it that I'd want to change. But Carolyn is a super reasonable person and just wanted to speak her mind, and all I wanted to do was allow her to do that. And so I think we achieved that. And we achieved, at least touching on some things that we can all think about from the perspective of Carolyn and people that think like Carolyn thinks. And so that's all that conversation was really about. So we'll highlight the positive, Phil. Would you like to do that first or negative? Which one would you like to do?
I don't know. That's a great question. I'm trying to think. Should we get it out of the way? The negative first? I kind of want to. I would like to hear positive, actually. Let's do positive.
So I want to say his name's Bino. Or Benno, Benno, Garwood, wrote in. We had a little bit of back and forth. He said, Ben and Phil, I'm sure you're about to endure an avalanche of bullshit given the subject matter of episode 89. Given the polarizing nature of the subject of race, it seems inevitable that people on both sides of the conversation will find reason to make noises in your direction. In my view, you are to be congratulated and thanked for taking this on. Openness of mind, a desire to understand the other, in quotation marks, self-restraint, inclusiveness, tolerance, all of these things are needed to sew up the ever-growing divide in our nation. But first and foremost, the indispensable character trait needed is courage. Your willingness to take on hard subjects, even if it means courting controversy, is courageous and admirable. This subject and many others are fraught with potential misunderstandings, and I understand those who shy away from them. But we have to talk to each other, listen to each other, and risk offense if we are to move forward or in any direction at all. Skipping ahead here, it's a long email, but being a middle-aged white male, I'm often confronted with concepts and ideas I've held that exist in something of a microcosm of my own experience. As of late, I've often not had the courage to engage in potentially sticky conversations for fear of betraying my own ignorance and causing offense where none was intended. This is somewhat a result of being in the midst of a personal, political, and social shift, probably the consequence of itching up on middle age. But at the end of the day, it's been much about not having energy for or interest in becoming engaged in debate with people with whom I disagree. This is also evidence of a certain level of misanthropy inching into my mindset. Episode 89 confronted me head on in the best of ways. Pretty well stated. Benno couldn't have, I'm Benno too, I guess.
Yeah.
A lot of ways. He couldn't have put my thoughts, codified or collected my thoughts better in that email. I do really feel that these things are important because they're difficult. And the fact, I'm not going to pat myself on the back for having difficult conversations. Why have a podcast where you're just going to talk about things that aren't contentious or difficult? That's my feeling. But I think we can all learn from what Benno is saying and learn from what Carolyn is saying, and that we can expand not only our horizons, but the way we think, the way we move through the world, and how open we are to new ideas, not only within hunting, but in life. So that's just what I think, and I'll continue to think that, and we'll continue to reflect that on THC moving forward. Now, there's always another side, isn't there, Phil?
Yeah, there is, which is, some people would say that's a good thing.
Yeah.
You've got, it's democracy.
And a long-awaited return of... Phil's going to read a mean comment in regards to episode 89. Take it away, Phil.
1 star. Title, Hunting and Social Justice.
My lord.
Ben seems to be on a mission to give voice to just about anyone who hates hunting or the majority of hunters. His latest podcast featured a woman who attacked American history with absolutely no pushback from Little Ben. Little Ben.
I'm average sized.
Somehow, your hunting club isn't okay. Oh, wait, hold on. Sorry. I think this might be a typo. Somehow, how your hunting club isn't okay if it happens to be made up of white guys. Okay, I think I know what he's trying to say. He's either too weak to have these conversations, or he's actually subversive. Either way, he's not someone we should be paying attention to.
My God. Let's take a moment to reflect on whatever that was. And we're back on Some Things Considered. THC.
I would just like to say that if you actually listen to the episode, there wasn't... Carolyn could not have been more warm, friendly, excited to have a conversation with you. There was no arguing. I don't think anything controversial was actually said in the episode. What people consider controversial is that...
We are talking.
Is that, yeah, you gave a voice to someone who is just introducing ideas that maybe the typical hunting audience hasn't explored before.
Listen, I can see it from the side of she's talking about history as if it weighs more on her present and her future than maybe I think about it. But she made the point she made. She said what she said. This is a studied and intellectual person who is published and has great opinions on something she's experienced personally. I haven't experienced this shit. I don't know anything about what it is to be a black female or have black parents who grew up as caretakers of an estate. I have no idea about that. And the Hunting Collective is very much about learning about perspectives that allow us to understand who we are and why we do the things that we do. So we're going to continue it.
Yeah. His comment that I think he was referring to, he said, featured a woman who attacked American history. He's probably referring to the fact that you had a brief conversation about how John Muir and TR had some racist, leanings in their writings, which is just a fact.
That's just
so. If stating a fact is attacking American history,
I'm not attacking American history.
That's like saying there used to be slaves in America.
Yeah,
it's like, how dare you attack American history?
There's so many good things. Someone wrote to me and said, "How can we pick out things in history? How can we pick through history like that?" Mm-hmm. I said, well, "We have to."
Yeah, you can't just ignore the things you don't want.
I don't like slavery. I like parades. You have to look at it with a pragmatic eye. You cannot say all of history is history. All of history informs who we are right now and what we do.
Even the ugly stuff that we don't
want
to talk about.
Stuff. Our institutions.
You're not attacking America by...
Our legislations. We took this land from people and killed them.
That is a fact. Another fact.
I can both recognize that, not be angered by it in one way or the other, and try to let it inform the way I move through this world. And so I would say it was 90% positive, 90-some percent positive. But I say the few people that were upset, it's worth addressing that because that's going to happen in these things. Because obviously, if you listen to what Carolyn's saying, she said, I appreciate what John Muir did for naturalism and environmentalism. I appreciate the work that he did. But there's this thing we have to acknowledge, which is some prejudices that he clearly held.
Yeah, and it colors the way that she might view the outdoor spaces in the present.
Just like she's not ignoring all the good he did, we can't ignore the bad he did. And so that's where we get to. We could probably go on all day and preach about that. But I will say, thanks for listening. And for those who just don't want to hear that in a hunting podcast, I understand. I get it. I've said this before on this podcast. I get it that sometimes you don't want to be presented with heavy stuff. And that's why we try to make fun sometimes while we're doing it. So that's that. Moving on to something that we really need to talk to Phil about. It's a big issue.
Uh-oh.
It's a big issue. Elias Torheiden. I only know how to say his name because he's written in before. He wrote an email, and it's entitled, "Rinella is a poaching SOB." And that got me. I was like defending, whoa, what?
Oh, yeah.
Bring it. But he says, "I couldn't help but notice Sneaky Steve's been sliding Phil into podcasts more and more lately. Seems like he's been trying to nab your prize show pony. I think giving Phil his own segment to ensure his loyalty was a cunning move on your part. Just make sure Rinella doesn't let him design a shirt or something." And he goes on, but he says, "Cheers, Elias."
Yeah.
What do you got to say there, Phil?
I think Steve he does the same thing that you do, where when he doesn't know how to transition, he looks around the room and thinks, okay, who haven't we heard from? And he sees me sitting across the table, and he goes, "What do you think about that, Phil?"
Yeah.
It's the same question every time.
You're a comfort blanket. You're a comfort blanket
and
for us.
Every time I'm like deer in the headlights, and I try to think of something to say. But Ben, you don't have to worry. Steve has never let me talk about Star Wars on his podcast.
That's why I did that, because I knew at some point it would come down to it, where you had to choose between me and that guy.
Yep.
And
nope, I don't think there's
choose wisely, Phil.
Yeah, there's no poaching happening.
Choose wisely.
Yep.
This train is headed out of the station. You're either on it or you're off it. Okay?
Got it.
Make a decision right now.
I'm worried. I can't. I had to weigh my pros and cons.
Make a public declaration of your loyalty. I forgot something that I want to play. Eric Hall, our friend Eric Hall. Can I say that he's our favorite listener? Yes, I'm saying it. He's our favorite listener. No offense to any of the other listeners out there. But Eric Hall is our favorite. And it's not even close. I might invite him to come to my house for Christmas.
Yeah,
he probably won't show up.
Big shouts to Eric Hall.
But yeah, you're the best. Don't get a big head about this, but we like you a lot. He did send multiple recordings in recently about some things. But we're going to play, Steve, oh boy.
It's okay. We'll cut this.
Phil's going to do a little compilation of Eric's thoughts for you here.
Hey, Ben, Eric Hall here again. Guess you're going to get tired of me. You and Phil both. Just finished episode number 89. Dr. Finney, think you both done a good job. Good conversation. Enjoyed it. I'd like to say I'm out ahead of you, though. This past year, talking to a couple black guys, African American, talking to them about hunting, shooting. We're going to set up a time. He's wanting to come up and shoot one of many kind of different styles, types of rifles, shotguns that I have. So we're going to hook that up. Never shot a gun before, so I think that'll be a good outing for him, good outing for me. Another guy, he's not interested in shooting or hunting, but he sure enjoys the deer meat. So I think y'all done a good job on the podcast. Enjoyed the conversation there, and I think we definitely need to be more inclusive in the hunting as far as African Americans hunting, women hunting. Looking forward to number 90. Y'all have a good Thanksgiving. Yeah, Ben, I just have to say, it's Eric Hall again, that you're feeling uncomfortable in Baltimore, parts of Baltimore. It's probably more founded in reality than Dr. Finney or Jonathan Hall not feeling comfortable on public land because white guys are hunting. You can run into policemen in Baltimore, black or white, and they'll tell you don't go here, don't go in these places. You're probably not going to run into a park ranger or National Forest ranger that's going to tell a black person, don't go here because so-and-so happened. But those police that will tell you don't go to a certain place in Baltimore basing on pure fact. That's just the way I feel about that.
So anyway, Eric had a lot to say about Baltimore, about the podcast. I like the guy. I don't know that he's wrong about the Baltimore point, but we'll leave that to where it is. And listen, we'll probably come back to this race and hunting conversation again, so just be prepared for that. Who knows where we will go, but we'll go somewhere. As we're moving along here, Phil, Blake McGee wrote in. He said, Ben, after listening to your podcast, I polled our state hunting group in Oklahoma. He polled them about the young man we talked about in Tennessee who kills a possible record buck, put it on YouTube, was not wearing orange. Obviously, he was hunting with a rifle. The kid's awesome, very respectful, praises the God and the landowner. What should the game wardens do since the deer was harvested illegally? So he put that out to his Facebook group. I don't know how many people are in it, but he did get a lot of answers by the looks of it. He gave 2 options: stiff warning, confiscate the kill, and a hefty fine. That's what Blake McGee gave to his Oklahoma hunting and fishing group. They're on, looks like, on the Facebooks. What do you think? What do you think won, stiff warning or confiscate the kill?
I'm gonna say that stiff warning one. I'm gonna guess.
It was a landslide.
Yeah,
494 to 27.
Oh. Well, if you voted, it would have been a 28, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would have voted. Boy, again, if I had to vote, just don't listen to me on this one. But if I had to vote, I would vote for confiscate the kill.
See, I originally, I think in the recording, I came out as saying, I think stiff warning's probably fine. And then, but then after I heard you argue it, I think I came down, I think an example has to be made somewhere.
I think you draw the line when you're putting it on the internet. I just think that if a game warden, I said this in the earlier podcast, I think if a game warden would have walked up on the guy dragging the deer out with no orange anywhere to be seen, you'd be like, hey man, where's your orange? I forgot it in the truck. Oh, okay. Well, let's have a conversation about this. I don't want to see this happen again. Mm-hmm. Go on about your day. But when you edit it, make a conscious decision to put that in the video.
You breaking the law, a video of you breaking the law, and put it on the internet.
Put it on the internet, knowing, I'm sure, that it's going to get a lot of attention and hoping that it does get a lot of attention, because you don't put things on the internet hoping no one sees them. And so I'm in the confiscate the kill, hefty fine still. But Blake McGee and his group, stiff warning, which I'm okay with too. Sure. I don't want to get in it, but I'm in it.
Yeah.
It's one of those.
Don't send an email. Send your emails to me.
Yeah.
don't send them to Ben.
One of those wishy-washy bullshit things that people do. So we're going to move on from that, and we're going to get to the work sharp, not so sharp moment. Play the jingle, Phil.
Work sharp, not so sharp moments. Sharp so you don't have to be.
Okay, Phil. This one is from Jared Michael Moon. 3 easy names to pronounce. He's a U.S. Army major, I believe, given what he says here. And he starts by saying classification, unclassified. Here we go. Not so short moment. He says, I'm an adult onset hunter. As a child, I shot squirrels and rabbits, but only picked up big game hunting 3 years ago after moving to Michigan. Given Michigan's draconian rifle hunting laws, I decided to start bow hunting. I balanced my lack of available mentors by spending every free moment on state hunting land or at my local archery shop shooting hundreds of arrows a day. I can become obsessed with new activities, which often includes spending much more money than I should, both of which can annoy my generally reasonable and loving wife. I calmed her by waxing poetic about providing family with meat in our newly purchased deep freezer. However, much like most new unsupervised hunters, I spent the first season cold, tired, and without any deer to bring home. Determined as I was, I continued to seize every opportunity to be in the woods. In the following year, I turkey hunted unsuccessfully and unsuccessfully squirrel and rabbit hunted. I coyote hunted unsuccessfully. I went on 2 DIY elk hunting trips to Oregon and Colorado, also unsuccessfully, and I scouted every inch of public land around Ann Arbor, Michigan. In that year of effort, I accomplished 2 things. I learned how stupid I had been in my first deer season, And I really, he put like 20 L's in there, really pissed off my wife being gone as much as I was. That's something, Phil, you probably don't know about yet.
Nope.
When you're
I never leave home.
When you're when you're a hunter, it's a balance between pissing off your wife and going hunting. So when it came to my second deer season, I felt prepared to finally arrow a deer and show my wife the fruits of my efforts. Unfortunately, the season started very slow, and to my wife, it seemed like more of the same. I knew, however, that I can just make it happen. Then I would be vindicated. Finally, my moment came. I was sitting in a blind on a bit of state land in the freezing cold late archery season when a brown ghost began to cross my path at 20 yards. I'm visualizing many things.
I'm visualizing like low fog.
Yeah, a brown ghost.
So maybe you hear some birds in the background.
Yeah, my son often has brown ghosts in his diaper. The doe moves slowly, stopping every few steps, presenting perfect broadside shot opportunities. I could taste the meat already. Once the doe stopped in my preferred shooting lane, I began my shot routine. Steady grip, tight, low front shoulder, slow draw to my anchor point, sticky glove finger steadying the arrow shaft as I drew back. Plop, pong, smack, fuck! That's how I wrote it. My finger created so much friction that my 80-pound bow popped the knock off the arrow. In my surprise, I triggered the release, firing nothing but a knock at a confused doe, and subsequently punched myself square in the eye and cut my cheek on the freshly de-knocked arrow. I couldn't help but laugh at my stupidity. While the doe seemingly smiled at a moron, it would not be the only time that I saw that look from a female that evening. My wife smirked at me as I walked back in the door with nothing but a black eye and a mountain of shame. She confronted me in the traditional fashion by mocking me and telling her mother. It's fantastic. We now live in Kansas City, and needless to say, I have changed my archery shot routine, which I'm happy to report helped me to take down my first big game animal, a barren ground caribou. But alas, my wife still likes to tell our friends about my not-so-sharp moment every time she jokingly complains about me spending too much time in the woods. Happy hunting, Jared. Phil, play the jingle.
Work sharp, not so sharp moments, sharp so you don't have to be.
Boy, Phil, that's something that would only happen to an archery hunter. Although you get scoped with a rifle if you ever try. So you're going to be a new hunter here real soon, my friend.
See, I'm listening to this story, and I'm just picturing this happening to me.
Yeah.
Like, immediately.
I'm picturing myself protecting you because you're a part of this podcast. And you're loyal. I'm going to protect you like a baby bird.
All right.
I won't let you get hurt by the gun or the bow.
Fine, I pick your podcast.
Perfect. All right, enjoy the interview with Brianna Pobiner from the Smithsonian.
I guess I grew up on an older road, a pedal to the metal.
Hey, Brianna, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Oh, I'm great. It's good to be. I'm like behind the scenes of the Smithsonian right now.
Welcome to Back in the Special Hallways.
Oh, yeah. You guys ever feel kind of like Indiana Jones, or maybe somebody even cooler than Indiana Jones?
Yeah, a little bit. Definitely.
Scientists.
It's an awesome place to work.
I
Yes,
got my
scientists
tea here.
cooler than Indiana Jones. I would say so.
Good. That's how we're going to market you.
Excellent.
For this podcast. You're going to love
Cooler than Indiana Jones. Awesome. I want a T-shirt that says that.
Indiana Jones 2.0.
Excellent.
What's up? You've done a lot of things that are cooler than Indiana. But first, let's explain. I think we could maybe start by explaining what paleoanthropology actually is.
Sure. So I'm a paleoanthropologist, and that means that I study people in the past. I'm particularly interested in the diets of people in the past, their kind of food gathering behaviors, looking at the evidence for the kinds of foods that they ate. And specifically, I'm interested in meat eating in human prehistory.
Yeah. So in human prehistory, meat eating, we all, I think, know that this is a very important turning point in our humanity and our evolution. But why, of all the fields of study that you could have gotten in personally, how did you get here? Why did you get here? I'm sure that's a loaded one, but
it's a good question. So I decided early on in my career that I wasn't really interested in studying the human fossils themselves. There just weren't enough of them, and there seemed to be a lot of kind of big egos fighting over small numbers of fossils. But to me, what something eats is so fundamental to everything about it. But I do really like bones. And so I decided I wanted to study animal bones with evidence for butchery on them. And that could give me a window into, like, a really direct window into early human behavior.
Yeah, well, we've talked about early human behavior in this podcast before. You'll go back over the summer. We talked to William von Hippel about this subject. And as we were talking about it, it struck me that I wanted to get in more of the mechanics of how we're making these large assumptions that we're making. And as you were just telling me in the elevator a little bit earlier, a lot of this stuff is abstract because it happens over millions of years, and it would almost be impossible for us to be precise with this kind of evidence. So can you just kind of set us in a place and time, like, when did meat eating become important for us outside of hunting, but like when was the first evidence that meat eating was there and it was becoming important to us as a species?
So that's actually a hard question to answer in some sense. So it seems to have been a process by which meat eating became important. So the earliest right now claims of butchery marks on animal fossils, which is kind of the real smoking gun evidence for meat eating in the past, comes from a couple of fossils that are 3.4 million years old from a site called Dakika in Ethiopia. After that, there's some evidence starting about 2.6 million years ago, 2.5 million years ago, also sites in Ethiopia, slightly later sites in places like Kenya and Tanzania. But it seems like really up until about 2 million years ago that meat eating was probably a pretty opportunistic and infrequent thing that early humans did. I should actually qualify that and say meat eating from large animals. Mm-hmm. So it's very likely that at the absolute beginning of the branching of the human family tree, the split from the branch that led to modern chimpanzees, who are our closest living relatives, even those earliest ancestors probably ate meat in the sense of small animals, things like maybe lizards, birds, rodents, other things that they may not have needed tools to be able to actually get into. But the fossil evidence for butchery from large animals starts somewhere between about 2.5 and 3.5 million years ago. By 2 million years ago, I was involved in some research at a site called Kandera South in western Kenya. And there we have evidence for early humans bringing animals to a central place to butcher them over and over again. So by this point, there's a little bit of a turning where, like, okay, this behavior is becoming a little bit more important. And then it kind of ramps up from there where we start seeing more frequent evidence of butchery of many different animals.
O'Reilly Auto Parts are in the business of keeping your car on the road. O'Reilly Auto Parts offer friendly, helpful service and the parts knowledge you need for all your maintenance and repairs. If you're confused about what part you need, like what wipers are going to be the best, what replacement headlights are going to be the best, go into O'Reilly and talk to the people that work there, because they're great and they're super friendly, and they'll get you squared away where you walk out knowing you got the right thing. They've got thousands of parts and accessories in stock, either in-store or online, so you never have to worry if you're in a jam. Do you need your windshield wipers replaced? You need a brake light fixed? You need some quick service? They'll help you find the right part or point you to the nearest local repair shop for help. The professional parts people at O'Reilly Auto Parts are your one-stop shop for all things auto do-it-yourself, and you can find what you need in-store or online. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today or visit us at O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. That's O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land. Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where Land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to Land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth.
One place.
So can you just, we've again talked about this before in the podcast, but you can put us in a place and time, 3.4 million years ago. I like 3 point something. That's 100,000 of that.
Correct.
Something. Yeah,
that's right.
Put us in a place and time. We're in Africa. What do we look like? During these first evidences as they arise, what do we look like? What are we doing? How are we living?
Yeah, good question. So
I say we, but
right, our ancestors and kind of our early relatives. So let's take 3.5 or 3 million years ago in Africa. So the predominant species that was around is one called Australopithecus afarensis, or Africanus, maybe later in time in southern Africa. And so these are early humans that are maybe 3.5 feet tall if you're female, maybe 5 feet tall if you're male. They walked upright on two legs. They were bipedal. All species on the human family tree were bipedal. They probably didn't walk exactly like we did. They retained some adaptations in their upper body to climb trees. So they probably spent some time in the trees, getting food, getting away from predators, maybe sleeping in the trees at night to be safe. But what they didn't have that later species had, at least that we can find in the archaeological record, is any kind of hunting technology. They made tools out of stone. They could use those tools to butcher animals, to break open their bones to get at marrow inside or brains. But they didn't have things like spears or bows and arrows. So part of the interesting question around when did early humans become really competent hunters is, when can we see the archaeological evidence for those tools in the archaeological record? We don't see that till about 500,000 years ago. Meat eating might go back 3.5 million years ago. So one thing I'm really interested in are questions around how might scavenging have been a prominent part of our evolutionary history.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, because I think we just went down and looked at the Hall of Origins here at the Smithsonian. It's something that there's a video of you in there. I'm like, that's her. There's a lot of things going on there, but I think one of the key understandings is, how long were we scavengers? And then when did we habituate this stuff? When did we start to understand how to use the tools, how to hunt, how to affect the world that wasn't right in front of our feet? So how long do you feel like that scavenging happened prior to that jump? Because I know that's a big jump.
Yeah. So, the interesting thing is I'm not sure that it was, I don't necessarily think that first there was a scavenging phase and then there was a hunting phase. I mean, even modern foragers scavenge today. So the Hadza in Tanzania sometimes get a high proportion of the meat that they eat from scavenging from lions. And I think in some senses scavenging gets this bad rap as something that's lesser than from hunting. But, scavenging often means that you don't come into close contact with predators. If you're passive scavenging and wait till they're done, you don't have to hunt the animals yourself. It's like free food a little bit.
A more efficient way.
Yeah, and maybe a less risky way. And so, but I do think that scavenging was probably the predominant way that early humans got meat from large animals, the ones that they couldn't collect or gather or kind of hunt with their hands, for a long period of time, probably, at least 1 million or 2 million years. I think that scavenging was a big, important part of our evolutionary history.
Yeah, and during this time, I think something that we're always trying to pinpoint and talk about is how we developed as humans because of our intake of meat. And we were talking about this before. There's the beginning, and then there's when it becomes popularized, or when we can find evidence that it was going on a larger scale that maybe affected a larger population. So when you're thinking of our diets at this point, are scavengers, we're omnivorous, we're eating whatever we can to survive. At least our ancestors are doing that. How much is meat helping to aid evolution at this point, when we don't really have evidence that it's on a mass scale, or there's large, we're taking down large ungulates and eating them, or whatever it might be?
That's an awesome question. And I think it's actually really hard to answer of how, even if meat eating was a small component of our dietary history, at that point in time, how important might it have been? So I read an interesting paper a little while ago from researchers who studied chimpanzee hunting, and it was they proposed something called the meat scrap hypothesis.
Yes.
Is that even scraps of meat for chimpanzees would have been so important nutritionally for certain components of, macronutrients and other things in their diet that that it would have been important enough that even infrequent hunting and meat eating of the monkeys and other small animals that chimps eat, that it would have been worth it, and that would have been a driving force for hunting in chimpanzees. And so I think that we can't necessarily equate the frequency of meat eating to its importance in our evolutionary history. And that's a way of me saying I don't know what the answer to that question is.
Yeah,
but it's a really good question.
But you say, and I was reading some of your work, and we were just talking about this, evolution is about benefits and cost, right? So as meat is introduced to the diet and scavengers are pulling, pieces of flesh off a already consumed zebra, like whatever's left, they're starting to see, whether they don't realize it, but they're starting to feel the benefits of that. And would that propel them forward? Right? The cost of getting the meat is well below the benefits of the nutrient-dense flesh that they're then eating, right? I mean, is that what propelled it forward?
I think so. I mean, and I think potentially, basically like a new kind of resource. Oh, well, these are, it's a resource that is, like you said, nutrient dense. It has a lot of protein, not as much with wild animals, but it would have had some fat, particularly the marrow in bones. And so I think that, protein and fat are two things that are real hard to come across in African savanna ecosystems. So I think even occasional meat eating might have been important from a nutritional perspective. And then that changed our behavior. Maybe people were, early humans were going out and actually actively scavenging more often. And maybe that eventually led to hunting. So,
gosh, I could go forever. But do you feel like I read another thing that you were writing, that over the course of 6 million years, our brain has increased 300%, the size of our brain, especially neocortex. But in the case of this, when did we know we got to adjust 300% of brain growth? Like, what percentage are we once we in this period of time and scavenger? Like, where are we and how much do we have left to go? So
the interesting thing is that there's a hypothesis called the expensive tissue hypothesis that is trying to link the expansion of brain size over human evolutionary history with meat eating. And so our brains are incredibly energetically expensive. They take up about 2% of our body weight. They use 20% of our energy at rest. If you're a baby or a kid, 65% of your energy goes to like maintaining and growing your brain. So a high cost in terms of energy. And so this hypothesis originally proposed that the way that from an evolutionary perspective, brain size could increase is by decreasing some other kind of energetically expensive tissue in the body. Well, that other energetically expensive tissue is gut tissue. And so the idea was that once early humans started incorporating meat into their diet, they could decrease. I mean, this is not quite how evolution works. It's not like they decided to decrease their gut tissue, but there was kind of a decreased selection pressure for having long guts to be able to digest plant foods, and that released a constraint on the evolution of brain size. And there would have been other selection pressure, probably from a social perspective, for growing larger brains. The problem, so that was I remember reading about that hypothesis as a undergrad and thinking, this is great. This probably explains a lot of, the link between maybe meat eating and brain growth, or brain expansion through time. The problem is that the timing doesn't work anymore. So the earliest evidence for meat eating, as we've talked about, is somewhere between 2.5 and 3.5 million years ago. But the big increase in brain size in our evolutionary history compared to body size. So as body size is slowly increasing, brain size is slowly increasing, but this big jump in brain size happens at about 1 million years ago. And that's long after we see even more significant meat eating in prehistory. So that, now there's an idea that maybe it was cooking that actually kind of, was related to that big brain size increase. Maybe.
Maybe. A lot of maybes in this.
A lot of maybes. My world is full of maybes, and that's all right. As a scientist, what I'm trying to do is kind of rule out some of the maybes and get a little bit closer to what we think we know.
And we were talking about this earlier. This is maybe jumping ahead and where I wanted to go, but like I first became interested in this years and years ago. I was writing an article about the paleo diet, and as a hunter, whether I'm going to play into this or whether I want to step back from it, like where as a hunter, I get it. I'm doing the paleo thing, but only because I like hunting and I like the meat that I get. And I started to read and from a lot of the dietitians and some of the practitioners of the paleo diet, these synthesized or like really boiled down numbers, 100,000 generations of this. And I started to parrot that because it was very convenient. Like, look at that. This proves that hunting is awesome. I never really looked into it. And then when you start to really break down what you do, you have rooms filled with books and fossils and skulls and all this stuff that comes out to say, like, what percentage of this do we actually know? And there's no way, given whatever percentage you might put on it, I don't know if you want to put a number on it. Is there any way to say?
It depends on what the question is in a sense. Like one of the things that I will often say is that we can know maybe some points in time in which we can see the earliest evidence for something or when it becomes more common. I can't tell you what proportion of early human diets 3 million years ago were meat as opposed to plants. Nobody can tell you that. If they tell you that, I would talk to somebody else.
Yeah, the practitioners. There's a documentary I just watched called Game Changers, where they're in there saying there's an anthropologist in there saying, well, it's not exactly humans and meat. It's not exactly what you think it is. And if you go talk to a paleo dietitian or somebody who's out there shouting about the paleo diet, they're going to tell you that meat is essential and this is how we came to be who we are, and you have to. The answer's got to be somewhere in the middle of that. It is.
I think it's somewhere in the middle of that. Yes, I study meat eating in human evolution. I don't necessarily think it was like the most important dietary transition in our evolutionary history. And I think, it's interesting. There's an idea that when modern humans first migrated into Europe and Western Asia, there was another species called Neanderthals living there. And so one thing that we see is that Neanderthals were actually excellent hunters. They were great at taking down big Ice Age animals. They probably were the most meat-eating of our evolutionary cousins. And when modern humans first migrated into Europe, there's an idea that actually they may have outcompeted the Neanderthals not by eating more meat, but by actually increasing their dietary breadth. So they would eat like smaller animals. They would eat things like snails. They would go after things like turtles. And so maybe it's actually our dietary flexibility that makes us so successful.
Yeah. And if you listen to all the dietitians out there and you think about like, where does eating meat sit? I think the smart ones, at least the ones that I've listened to, are saying like we're omnivorous. Like,
we are definitely omnivores. We are not, naturally carnivores. We are also not naturally herbivores. Like we are square omnivores.
Yeah. And how do we, I was reading another thing you read that said that, because I want to make people think that I know this stuff without reading it from you. I don't. What did you say? There was 18 species on our evolutionary tree.
At least.
Yeah. And you guys I saw you had a little timeline in your office there. That I looked at that timeline. And what struck me is, and what I think probably strikes you.
There's one right in front of us, too. Here's another one.
You have timelines everywhere. There's a guy at the top. Looks like us.
That's right.
So you're tracking in this graph I'm looking at 7 million years into the past. And there's 18 plus species on the evolutionary tree that eventually came to 7 billion, whatever the number is, of humans on this earth.
Yep, one species left, just us. Yep.
And so if you're talking about, like, where does this all come to a head? It's that there's some other species you can study that are now gone, totally extinct.
That's right.
We're not. What the hell did we do?
Exactly. What did we do that was different? And it's interesting. Another thing that strikes me about, and so this is a bar graph, sort of a bar chart of the fossil evidence of different early human species. One thing that always strikes me is that most of the time there was more than one kind of human walking the earth.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't just that there's this march of man of sort of one species evolving into another. They were probably doing different things in the past. Some of them might have been eating more meat. Some of them might have been eating more plants. Some of them might have been eating a lot of insects. And so I think there's kind of when people talk about what was the paleo diet, I'm like, what, like at what time, in what place, by what people? And so I think, again, versatility and kind of flexibility is probably actually what led modern humans to dominate the planet.
Domination. And that's what, I think that's the question that we really have to ask. Not whether eating meat accelerated our brain growth and shrunk our gut size to where we could be to where we are today. We know it played as well as hunting because that's how we got our meat. That all this played some role in our domination, as we'll say. We'll put some
from an evolutionary perspective. There's a lot of us on the planet. I mean, there's only one species of human. That's not such a great, strategy from an evolutionary sense, though.
Yeah, we have our own monoculture.
That's right.
And so the question then becomes, why? Why did we above all others, right? And then how do we trace that back and continue? Because that why kind of stretches over millions of years, and how at each step in this process, you have it broken down by millions of years here. Like each million year, how did we, over each one of those 18 species, how did we move forward and they die off?
Yeah, so the why questions are the hardest to answer in the past. And I mean, our species only evolved 300,000 years ago. So most of the time during human evolutionary history writ large, we were actually not on the planet. We also aren't the longest lived of the species on our family tree. So Homo erectus, takes the prize for that. It was around, I don't know, probably 9 times longer, maybe 8 times longer than our species. I hope we end up surviving that long if we don't screw it up. I think that is exactly the question. What led us to maybe outcompete other species that we were living alongside? There's been some interesting articles that I've read recently that say maybe it's just a little bit of a difference in our reproductive rate. Like maybe it's just we had 1 or 2 more kids per family, and that was the way that we were able to outcompete Neanderthals, for instance. I often get asked, why did Neanderthals go extinct? Why did any of these species go extinct? And I will turn around and say, why are species going extinct today? There are probably multiple components. Obviously, humans are a part of it for most of them. But whether it was, changing climates that led to their preferred food and the areas where they like to live disappeared, whether it was also competition with modern humans for the same resources, whether it was, maybe the cooperative nature of modern humans and having kind of extended trade networks. Maybe it was that. Maybe it was that we were able to kind of out cooperate them. That's another idea.
Yeah. There's a lot. I mean, you gave a talk that I was watching just called is human
evolution over?
Is it over? I was like, yeah, maybe.
no, it's not.
Not for us.
That's right.
And it started to touch on. I want to eventually get back to the timeline, but I found this interesting. It started to touch on contraception and C-sections and the pelvic forms of a chimpanzee versus a human. All these interesting things. Points in evolution where our bodies and our brains have evolved to some certain stimuli or some certain way of being, and then we change that pretty quickly via technology or some other sort of change, and it drastically impacts our own evolution. And so give us I don't know how you even start that conversation or what I even just said, but
one thing that's important to think about is that humans are amazing at altering our own environment. And so we do that on an incredibly large scale with our planet. We do that on a small scale, both sort of from a biological and a social perspective. So But the question of the title of the talk is human evolution over? Absolutely not. And so I think, from the perspective of the things out there that can kill us, they are less oftentimes today large predators, but they are things like tiny microbes. And so the selection pressures that are happening in modern humans today, honestly, are mostly along the lines of health and disease. Because you know what? A lot of people still die from infectious disease. A lot of people still die from, cardiovascular disease. And so adaptations and changes that help people avoid that, or that make some people more likely to survive that, those are really important. And that's where evolution's happening.
Yeah. And as we get through this, I mean, you even brought up, there was some sort of virus that was discovered under some permafrost, some ice. What if something melts and some human ending virus is coming now. I'm like, oh no. Kissing my
Run
wife.
away from the
I
Arctic.
love you. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So, well, and I was actually reading yesterday about, sadly, there are, as the Arctic is melting, there are archaeological sites that are basically being thawed, and there's this evidence that's being destroyed now. And so there's some great partnerships, totally off topic, between archaeologists and First Nations peoples in northern Canada to go and rescue this heritage. But yeah, I mean, if an ancient virus, that has been frozen in the permafrost for thousands of years, basically gets reactivated, I don't know. Maybe we should go to Mars.
Yeah, colonize Mars.
That's right.
I've seen the movies.
Exactly.
You're like Indiana Jones. We'll probably send you up there.
That's right. And I'll figure it out for you.
Gotta get your cool hat. We should return to the actual timeline of what I was hoping to get to. But there's two things. We're talking about scavenging, but there's two things I think that are important here. You can tell me in which order. Tools and fire. Yeah.
So at least in the order that we see in the archaeological record, tools definitely came first. So the earliest technology goes back to right now about 3.3 million years, stone tools from a site called Lomekwi in Kenya. And then kind of like the evidence for butchery, we also see a little bit of a gap in stone tool technology, picks up again around 2.5 million years ago. But the earliest stone tool technology called, there's the Lomekwian, but the Oldowan technology that lasted for over 1 million years is basically you take a roundish rock, you hit an angular rock with it, and you knock off a stone flake. So the tool is that stone flake, which has a sharp edge. It allows you to, butcher animals, cut wood, sharpen a stick, do all kinds of, maybe pounding tools for processing plants. It allows you to just do all kinds of things that you couldn't do before. It also allows you to start processing your food outside of your mouth. So at the same time that we see the origin of stone tool technology, we see in one branch of our evolutionary history, the one that led to us, we see a decrease in the size and strength of the jaws and teeth because basically people are processing food outside of their mouths a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you would imagine if I have a tool here and I have a really tough piece of meat,
exactly.
Pound on a little bit. Make
it a little softer, make it so you don't have to spend. I mean, chimpanzees, our closest living relatives, spend an inordinate amount of time just chewing. And for us not to have to do that, we can spend time doing other things, even our earlier ancestors who were eating meat and plants.
Yeah, and from there, and you were showing me some of the early tools, and people think, like, tools? No, it's just a chunk of rock that has a certain shape that can be used for a certain thing. And to look at them, that's not impressive at all to our modern minds, but it's something that going from kind of the modern idea of what a tool is, these things are just, when you show them to me, I'm like, oh, that's a nice tray of rocks.
That's a nice chunk of rock. Right. Yeah. And so, I mean, they don't look impressive, but, whether they were cooler than iPhones is, they were more important to our evolutionary history. I mean, the ability to use tools to make other tools, to use tools to modify our environment, to use tools to get food. It was just transformative.
Yeah. Yeah. And we go like probably at least 1 million or so years with tools without fire, right?
Oh, absolutely. Actually, longer than that. So right now, I think the earliest solid evidence for controlled use of fire comes from about 1 million years ago. Some people want to push it back to about 1.5 million. But certainly, people are eating meat. They're using tools long before we have good evidence for cooking. That said, I think the evidence for cooking is a little harder to find. So it may be that people were maybe sporadically using fire, but longer before then. But, I can only go with the evidence that we have.
Yeah. So based on that evidence that we have, when do you really start to line up fire, tools, scavenging, all the things we're doing to get meat with our brains exploding and growing to start this, really raced, but this movement towards Homo erectus and then Homo sapien.
So interesting. So Homo erectus is a species that evolved just a little after 1.9 million years ago and lasted up until a little less than 150,000 years ago. So it was sometime during that species' evolutionary history that we see earliest fire 1 million years ago. Technology is well before then. Meat eating is well before then. But also the biggest increase in brain size compared to body size is also at about 1 million years ago. So there was potentially, at least with the evidence that we have now, something happening around that time that may have, caused some significant changes in the biology and behavior of that species. That species is probably sort of our great-grandparent species or grandparent species. So right now, from the fossil evidence that we have, it looked like Homo erectus in Africa evolved into a species called Homo heidelbergensis. And that species populations in Africa evolved into Homo sapiens. So they were an important part of our evolutionary history.
And in that, when we look at, if I'm looking at kind of like the line graph of brain growth, the 300%, and where in that does it spike, or does it really start to curve?
So the sort of the big inflection point is at 1 million years ago. So it's slowly going up with body size kind of at the same rate between 6 million years ago and 1 million years ago. And then all of a sudden you get this kind of big uptick. And so you get a big increase in brain size starting at about 1 million years ago. So by that time, Homo erectus body size was already a kind of basically modern human body size and shape.
So you get the body size and shape. Is the gut, the large intestine, everything kind of already shrunken to the point? It
is. And so the guts of Homo erectus is much more not like a gut of a chimpanzee, which has kind of like a cone-shaped gut, but more like a narrower barrel-shaped gut like we have.
And at this point, how long have we been eating meat?
At least 1.5 million years, potentially 2.5 million years.
And how long have we been hunting at this point?
That's a good question. So, I'm really conservative about how long we've been hunting, in the sense that I want to see the technology that to me absolutely screams we are definitely hunting. The oldest spear points that we see in the archaeological record are about 500,000 years old. So they're from a site called Katupan in South Africa, and the end of those spear points have impact damage on them. We know that those things were used to to hunt with. So I think it's very possible that hunting with wooden tools, hunting with other tools that haven't been found, happened before then. But I in my timeline, 500,000 years ago is definitely something I can feel comfortable with.
Feel comfortable. Yeah, that's more conservative than I've heard in the past.
Oh, really?
You hear a lot of 1.6 million years is a number it's thrown around.
So it's interesting. I mean, some of the research I did for my PhD was studying fossils from a site called Kubifora in northern Kenya. And so I was looking at butchery marks on the animal fossils from a couple of excavations up there. And at that point, this is for sure Homo erectus, and the Homo erectus looked like they were getting access to the best parts of animals. They were butchering big animals. They were getting had butchery marks on the ribs, where usually evisceration happens by the predators first. They're not scavenging those. They have butchery marks on the meatiest parts of bones. I wouldn't necessarily call that hunting. I call that early access. I don't think they're taking those animals down, but I think they're getting there soon after they die. So I think that's a nuance that would maybe that's why I wouldn't call that hunting.
Yeah, so you're saying they see a sick animal,
exactly,
or an old animal,
or they're chasing a predator off of a kill, or they're maybe they're using rocks or something to knock down these big animals. I don't know how they do that, but maybe they could. But yeah, so I think they are getting early access to these animals, and they're able to sort of control the carcasses, not have predators come in and chase them off.
And so this all kind of comes to a head with the question that I know you'll be like, well, I'm working on it.
Yeah.
I'm here every day. I'm working on it. That the acceleration, or maybe the bell curve and brain growth, however you want to describe it, there's our diet, our social leaps that we're making forward, we're developing tools, and now we're eating cooked meat, and all these things that are happening within this kind of 500,000 year span, right? If we're saying you can put evidence of hunting at 500,000 years, evidence of fire maybe 800,000 years or something like that, maybe, to 1 million, and then the brain growth's at 1 million. What's happening in this kind of very important 500,000 years? Because prior to that, we're really talking about 1 million years here, 1 million years there.
Yeah.
Now we're talking about a shorter period of time in which we can really analyze what's going down.
Yeah, so it's a good question, and whether all of these different things are coming together at the same time or not, whether there are other factors that are important, like maybe there's slow increases in population size at this point. starting almost 2 million years ago, early humans were migrating out of Africa into Asia. So, there may have been a component of encountering new environments, new plants, new animals that they could potentially eat. So I think there's even more factors to think about than even the ones we've been talking about.
O'Reilly Auto Parts are in the business of keeping your car on the road. O'Reilly Auto Parts offer friendly, helpful service and the parts knowledge you need for all your maintenance and repairs. If you're confused about what part you need, like what wipers are going to be the best, what replacement headlights are going to be the best, go into O'Reilly and talk to the people that work there because they're great and they're super friendly and they'll get you squared away where you walk out knowing you got the right thing. They've got thousands of parts and accessories in stock, either in-store or online, so you never have to worry if you're in a jam. Do you need your windshield wipers replaced? You need a brake light fixed? You need some quick service? They'll help you find the right part or point you to the nearest local repair shop for help. The professional parts people at O'Reilly Auto Parts are your one-stop shop for all things auto do-it-yourself, and you can find what you need in-store or online. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today or visit us at O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. That's O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land. Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where Land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to Land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth.
Yeah. How do you guys, when you're looking at this in your daily, I think we should get to exactly how you look at bones and how you're coming up with a lot of this, but in your day-to-day work, how are you moving these ideas forward? How are you learning more?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things. One is that we can go dig up more fossils that have butchery marks. I think that's hugely important, and it's a fun thing to do. We can go back and re-study collections where people haven't actually looked at them for butchery marks yet. So I'm doing some of that as well. We can also do butchery experiments. So we can make replica stone tools like the kinds of tools that early humans used. We can use them to butcher animals, and we can, like scientists do, we can change a variable and see how that changes an outcome. So I have done butchery experiments on deer where we are changing the kind of rock that the tools are made from, or we're changing actually the expertise of the butcher. Is an expert butcher butchering your animal, or is a novice butcher butchering your animal? What does that mean for where the cut marks end up? What does that mean for how many cut marks there are? Can we look at something like expertise in the fossil record? I was actually really excited about that experiment, and it turned out that there was no statistical difference between the butchery marks made by the expert and the novice butcher.
I could tell you in a modern sense there would be.
Well, yes, and I was surprised because as watching, I worked with a wonderful grad student from the UK named Charlie Higson on this project. It was his master's project, and he was the novice butcher. He was a vegetarian and had not butchered anything before, and he was really game. He was great, but he didn't know what the heck he was doing when he started off. But interestingly, over the course of a couple hours, this was a butchering domestic pigs. He kind of figured it out. And so kind of watching him figure out, I can actually like put my hand under a muscle and pull it off, and I can figure out where the muscle insertion points are and cut there instead of just like whacking away aimlessly. So
And that seems to me is very natural. Like blunt dissection of, the back leg of a deer is like, look at the muscle groups, look where the lines of sinew and tissue are, and pull them apart and just cut away the connective, and then you're good to go. I imagine that our earliest ancestors were looking at the same kind of thing. Like,
well, and especially if they were spending a lot of their time hunting and eating these animals, and if our knife dulls, we just go sharpen it. And so, if you have stone tools that you're working on, you can sharpen them in a sense, but they may have been even more interested in kind of protecting the edges of their stone tools and not letting them get dull. Or maybe not, because there were stone tools all over the place. So maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of claims out there, the paleo diet claims and all the things we've kind of talked about. And we were discussing earlier kind of the poles of this, which is the vegan folks or vegetarian folks were trying to disassociate the importance of meat or trying to lessen it a little bit and trying to move away from eating meat. And then you have the paleo diet folks that are trying to over dramatize or over specialize our diets and say that we ate large amounts of meat. I've read a lot of what you say about this, but what do you think about that?
Yeah.
Did our ancestors eat such large amounts of meat that accelerated brain growth, and then our brains got bigger, and then hunting,
and that made us human, right?
Yeah, so then hunting helped us develop socially, helped us develop ways of communicating with each other, helped us develop hierarchies and things that never were there before. So where do you stand on all of that?
So, I am not an end member type person. I am a middle of the ground type person, mostly because I think, when I look at the evidence that we have, I'm like, I don't actually think we have enough evidence to look at things like the proportion of meat in the diet and how important it was. It was there. The other thing is that, people who want to say like the paleo diet was this. Okay, again, what paleo diet? What people were talking about? Let's look at people today. I mean, even just modern foragers eat incredibly varied diets depending on where they live, what's in season, what's in front of them. And so I don't think we can characterize any kind of ideal ancestral diet during whatever time in which early humans were kind of living in harmony with their environment. I think there's this real tendency to romanticize the past. In that sense. That said, I mean, there are commentaries about kind of modern industrial farming that I think are really important to pay attention to. And so I think if conversations about how we should be eating are also starting with what's best for our health and the health of the planet, that's really important. But I think, picking and choosing from some evidence from the past and saying, oh, well, because our ancestors did X, that's the way we should live, maybe not necessarily.
Yeah, and during that time we were talking about, 800,000 years, 200,000 years, our environment's become unpredictable. We change landscapes. We're moving around the world
and
as we know it now.
Environments have always been unpredictable. Climates have always been changing. There was no sort of stable state at which we should kind of hearken to go back to. Yeah. So I think we have to be, in some senses realistic about diets today and sustainability. But I also think that we, there wasn't some idyllic point in the past that we should strive to go back to.
Yeah.
So,
especially
and because there were different kinds of early humans around. Like I said, there were Neanderthals who probably ate more meat than any other species. They're extinct. Do we want to emulate that? I mean, I'm joking a little bit, but we should think about that.
Yeah. And I've been looking into this a lot recently, and it comes back to being omnivorous and like also being practical and pragmatic about what we're saying here, because you always read this and then it becomes dogma, right? It becomes something that meat is bad, cholesterol is bad. The vegan diet is great. Let's eat all meat. There was a guy who had autoimmune disease and got cured by only eating meat.
So therefore it's good for everybody. I mean, the other thing is that modern we are incredibly, we have sort of low genetic diversity, surprisingly, for modern humans, but we're different people. And so depending on our kind of, areas of origin in our ancestry, we have different adaptations and different mutations to be able to digest different kinds of food. So I think we also have to keep that in mind as we think about not prescribing kind of a single diet for every human on the planet. I also think, there's a component of this. I do research in a lot of foreign countries, and I think the idea of like asking people to exclude certain, types of food from their diet because it's healthier is maybe just unrealistic to folks living in a lot of places in the world.
Yeah. There's a lot of this is some first world.
Absolutely,
issue.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of things at issue are first world. But do you feel, tracing back our ancestry, I would love to believe that hunting was this giant leap forward and like number one on the list of evolutionary drivers. But there's also agriculture. There's also domestication of animals. That happened more like 12,000 years ago rather than... So there is... I mean, obviously we know that hunting has been a part of our humanity for longer than some of these other things.
Yes, absolutely.
So we can
longer
say
than
that.
agriculture and domestication. I would 100% agree that hunting has been part of our evolutionary history for much longer than agriculture and domestication. Agriculture and domestication, unfortunately, probably had a bigger impact on our evolutionary history. And I say unfortunately because that impact wasn't always positive, neither for us nor for the planet. And the fact that most of us rely on so few highly domesticated foods is not necessarily like a really good strategy from a economic and
it strikes me, if you laid out how we currently eat, our current American diet, how the food comes to our plates, how it goes in our mouth, how nutrient dense it is or isn't in this case, if you laid that out, devoid of all the other factors of where we are in our evolution, you say, well, that's not the right way to do it. There's no way that's right based on everything that we know.
Yeah. And I mean, I think, but one benefit that we have in the U.S. is that we have a lot of us, not all of us, have a lot of food choices. And so I think that, the ability to think, figure out what our priorities are for modern diets and make good choices. We are pretty privileged in this country to be able to do that. A lot of us, not all of us.
Would it be accurate to say then that this kind of story of the evolution of our meat eating and of our diet is about choices? Like the more that we learn, the more we're able to choose.
I think that's a great way to put it. And sometimes I one of my biggest frustrations with sort of the paleo diet movement is that a lot of it is about excluding food. Like don't eat legumes or starchy vegetables or dairy or, this because our ancestors didn't eat it. I'm thinking, really? Because I don't think a million years ago somebody would have looked at food that would have been edible and went, no, I'm not going to eat that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, if you're really following the paleo diet, you would just eat whatever was around.
Everything.
Yeah.
Exactly.
If you saw an egg, you're like, I'll eat that.
Exactly.
And that's, maybe we can start a new thing called just like the choice diet, where you're just going.
Your choice is eat all the food.
Your choice is eat whatever's in front of you.
Exactly.
And that just goes back to where this argument is really just based on our intellectual ability now, but our ability to have these choices and look around and be able to say, I would like to only eat vegetables.
Exactly. And I joke about that sometimes, but I think some of this is about, our ancestors didn't eat XYZ. They didn't eat grains. They didn't eat this. And we have not had enough time to adapt to those foods. And to that, I say, so there's really good evidence. I mean, humans can evolve pretty quickly. The fact that about a third of us on the planet today can digest lactose or milk sugar as an adult, my favorite example of human evolution, around 7,000 years ago, not a single person on the planet could digest milk after the age of, 2 or 3, which is kind of when traditional weaning is.
I just heard about this for the first time like 2 weeks ago. I'm like, why are we talking about this?
Yes, I think this is hugely important. And so, and there were multiple different mutations in multiple populations of people who basically domesticated dairy animals. And that caused the ability of humans to digest milk as adults. Milk is a great resource. It has protein. It has fat. It is a clean liquid if you're moving into a new environment and maybe all your crops fail, but you can still drink milk. So, and there's also evidence that people there are some populations that have been eating a higher starch diet that actually have genetic adaptations to be able to digest starch better. Wow. So the idea that like modern humans, we can't, there's this mismatch and we haven't had enough time to adapt to eating these foods, I think it's hogwash.
Yeah, well, I think it is too. And then people are always, they want to have the prescription, right? They want to tell you.
Exactly. Eat this and this and this and you will be healthy.
I mean, if you watch the Game Changers documentary, it would seem as if, it's not if it would seem as if, they were saying basically that meat is poison. Like that is what they are. They never say it outright.
Yeah, interesting.
But all the evidence presented is like meat is bad for you. Meat is, there's examples of I went vegetarian, I went vegan, and I got better erections, and it fixed my joints, and it did this and that. You're like, wow.
I mean, and there's there's lots of anecdotal evidence in all kinds of directions.
Yes.
And I think, part of what's tough about making, wide sweeping statements about nutrition is that a lot of the studies have been done with small numbers of people. A lot of them are self-reporting studies. I think it would be tough to be a nutritionist today because of all the anecdotal evidence out there, and even the good scientific evidence sometimes can be contradictory because I think people are complex, and our bodies are not always going to respond in the same way. I mean, again, caveat, I'm not a nutritionist. But I do think that the idea that there is one end all be all that will fix all of your problems, all of your health issues. I mean, the other thing that I will often say if, people are asking me, which they shouldn't necessarily for dietary advice, is that what are your priorities? Are you trying to eat for cardiovascular health? Are you trying to eat for longevity? Are you trying to eat because you have a autoimmune issue? Or how can there possibly be one diet that, is good for everybody?
Well, and part of to go to that point, part of the reason why we're sitting here and part of the reason why it's relevant is because people have prescribed ancestral diets as ways for us to get healthy and tried to trace these lineages in ways that are really just disingenuous. And, hogwash is a good way to put it. You can always tell when somebody's full of shit. Yeah, you can always tell when somebody's full of shit when they're taking a very complex topic and trying to boil it down to something that's digestible in whether it's fact or in this case an actual diet. That's how I first started sniffing around the paleo diet. I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
So you're telling me there's this doesn't seem like you've thought this out at all.
And I think, yes, there's something to be able to kind of, break down complicated ideas and present them in a simple way. But I think doing it in a way that's ignoring evidence or being disingenuous is that's not cool.
And it's happening a lot. In a lot of places, but especially with our food, because people want to be the prescribers, not the informers. And there's nothing about what you do here at the Smithsonian or science or research that is biased. I mean, you're flying to Kenya, unearthing bones, or watching. We should talk about some of the things that you've done in that place. Watching hyenas and lions take down zebras, and then go and collecting the bones later and examining them. For the predatory behavior around those bones, so you can then compare it to ancestral things that we find, fossils that we find. It's that is just scientific.
It's asking a question. It's looking for evidence. I mean, like I said before, I did this butchery experiment looking to see. I had a prediction that expertise of the butcher would have had some influence on different variables of cut marks. That was incorrect.
Yeah.
And so, that's still important to research and to publish and say nope, maybe we have to ask a different question. And so I think a big part of being a scientist, especially a scientist who studies the past, is trying to figure out what questions can you ask that you can actually find evidence for.
Yeah.
And then if whatever your answer is interesting. So I think, there's this idea that scientists are out there trying to prove their theory or their hypothesis. No, we're trying to just figure out, get a better version of what actually happened in the past.
Yeah, and I think you can talk
about a more
about
realistic version. Not
right, and there's
version.
modeling of behavior that goes on, which is to say, I worked for 3 years on something that I found out it wasn't even worthy of 6 months or a month, but I did find out that I was wrong, and here's why.
Exactly.
And there's still some value in it.
I had a whole part of my one of my big dissertation questions was I thought that you could be able to tell the species of carnivore based on the size of tooth mark it makes, based on the size of tooth marks that it makes. And so because I work in Africa, the carnivores that I was studying were mostly lions, hyenas, leopards, cheetahs, jackals, things like that. And it turns out that doesn't work. It turns out that big carnivores will make big tooth marks, but and small tooth marks, and the small carnivores make the small tooth marks. So maybe you can say something about carnivore body size based on tooth marks, but I cannot look at an individual tooth mark and tell you who made it. Yeah, that was disappointing. I could, and actually there was another research team that, as I was doing my dissertation, did a similar study and published that. And I was like, okay, yes, we're done. We found the same thing. So,
but the answer to the question, even if it's no, is important.
Exactly. And I think that's something that's really crucial to remember. And so, okay, that doesn't work. That means that we have to look at it in a different way or ask a slightly different question.
Right. So you're just eliminating that line of thinking so you can move
Exactly.
on to, and then eventually you make an important discovery. You don't just like read a couple of books and look at a couple of things and go, here's
the answer to everything.
I got it.
Exactly.
And so that's, I think why that's all of this. Well, so that's why what you do is particularly interesting to me. And maybe it's a little bit sad because it's just modeling behavior that we don't see in a lot of our popular culture.
Well, it's interesting. I think I'm getting really interested in sort of science communication and public engagement with science. And one of the things that I see a lot is that people are skeptical of science or uncomfortable about science because, they think that scientists change our minds all the time because one study says this and another study says this. And for people that feel much more comfortable with like, I want the answer and I want it not to change, that is unfortunately not how science works. Science builds on prior evidence. We investigate something. We find something different maybe than other researchers have before. But as someone who studies human evolution, sort of the major grand narrative don't tend to change that much. We know that like chimpanzees are our closest living relatives. We know that humans have been evolving for 6 million years. We know that, bipedalism came before tool use, came before increase in brain size. A lot of that stuff, like those milestones, the order of those milestones, we may shift the like exact date of when we see the earliest or latest evidence of something. We may add a species to the human family tree, but it doesn't mean that everything we ever knew has sort of been turned on its head by one new discovery.
Yeah. Yeah, it builds on itself, right?
It does.
And it totally makes sense to me. And I think we should talk about what you're not just super interested. You spend a lot of time looking at bones.
I do.
But
I
you
love
didn't
looking at bones.
You didn't come up like as a bone enthusiast, right? You were like, you know what I like to do.
Right. I'm just going to stare at bones all day. So no, I mean, and I'm the questions that I'm interested in. I really want to know what people were doing in the past. I want to know what they were eating. I want to know where they were living. I want to know I want to know a lot of things I probably can't, like what choices were they making and what factors were involved in those choices. But again, what are the questions that I can ask that I can find evidence for? And so the questions that I'm interested are mostly around bones, or at least bones are the evidence that I can use to find the answers to most of those questions.
Yeah, it's a means to an end. As I was thinking about it, you're showing me a lot of, hey, here's a zebra bone. I'm like, why?
Why do I have a zebra bone?
Why does this person have a zebra bone in the cabin?
Office?
Yeah. But those bones are a means to the end. Like they're getting you along the lines of answering those questions. And so I guess to kind of try to wrap this up, we'll never be able to do that, but
we'll have to talk for 8 more hours.
Yeah,
and then.
that's what we were talking about earlier. Like if I wanted to like extract and not distill this all down, we'd probably have to talk for like
a couple days.
Yeah, about 10 podcasts worth. But I think to try to wrap this up, we've touched upon a lot of things, but important questions I think to a lot of people listening to this is like, where does meat eating sit on the importance of human evolution? Where does hunting sit then as a means of getting that meat? Because there's been a lot of wild claims about that. So we've kind of addressed that as much as I think we probably could. But what's the future of your work?
Yeah.
Where can we go from here? How can we get better answers to these questions, or how can we answer new questions? Like, what are you focused on?
Yeah. So again, a couple of things. I'm still studying fossil collections to look for butchery marks on them. And so when we have big collections that have butchery marks, we can look at things like, well, what animals are people butchering and what animals were they not butchering? And what habitats were those animals living in? And what can that tell us about what kind of habitats early humans were hanging out in? So I'm still going to continue to study fossil collections. I'm still going to continue to do research doing butchery experiments to see if I can sort of refine some of our understanding about butchery behavior. I'm working now with a colleague of mine, Jennifer Parkinson, who works at University of San Diego, and we're studying a fossil collection in Texas that has been interpreted as the remains of a saber-toothed den. So, I love working in the modern world. I still do research in a place called Alpejita Conservancy in central Kenya. And, watching predators eat things and trying to understand all those patterns. But there are predators that were around in the past when early humans were eating meat that aren't around today, like saber-tooths. And so the only way we're going to understand what it looks like when saber-tooths chew on bones, and maybe what it looks like when early humans are scavenging from saber-tooths, are to look at the remains of saber-tooth den fossils. And so that's another kind of avenue that I'm interested in. Like, I'm still interested in trying to figure out, can we document different chewing patterns left by different predators? It was a question I asked in my dissertation, almost 20 years ago. It's a question I'm still asking, and I'm still trying to refine those models.
Yeah, and how much during your time you're doing this? How many years?
At least 20 years.
20-some years.
Yeah.
How much has we go back 20 years ago? How much has what we know now changed in 20 years?
Yeah, so it's changed. Well, I was going to say it's changed a lot in the sense that there's been a lot more evidence at it. So we have more sites that have butchery marks. We actually have better techniques for capturing things like the sizes and shapes of butchery marks and carnivore tooth marks. So, when I was doing my dissertation, I would make an impression of a tooth mark. I would measure it with a set of calipers, and I would give you a linear measurement. And now people are using like sophisticated, high-powered microscopes to get a 3D shape of those carnivore tooth marks, and they're starting to be able to distinguish between different species. That's awesome. So we can use new tools and techniques. We can go back and look at the same fossil evidence. And so I had the privilege of actually doing a pilot study looking at early human fossils. I was interested in saying, like, well, early humans, if they're encountering carnivores more later in our prehistory, they're probably going to actually have carnivore bite marks on them. So I studied some early human fossils at the National Museums of Kenya, expecting to find carnivore bite marks, finding none of those, but maybe finding some marks from other humans. So, can we look at things like cannibalism in our evolutionary history? You have to stay tuned for that one.
Ooh, next
podcast.
Coming up next time,
that's right.
Cannibalism.
People eating people.
A little bit of dark. How has cannibalism worked into our human evolution? No, all this is, to me personally, very interesting. And like I said, with many of the topics we cover, this one especially, it goes in crazy directions as you start to relate this to who we are, what we are, why we do what we do.
Yeah.
I mean, I have like 10 links of things I read that you've written and other people have written, and then it just becomes a big conversation. So thanks for being a part of that conversation.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah,
it was
and
fun.
I'm going to go sneak around the Smithsonian. Don't tell anybody.
I'm gonna follow you. That's my job. I can't. I don't want you to become part of the collection.
That's
you might
true.
end up in a closet somewhere.
Stumble into the wrong. Yeah, I'll be a skeleton in a closet somewhere. You got a lot of skeletons, a lot of heads.
I do.
You feel like people are the most. We could tell people, if you've never been to the Smithsonian, what are you doing with your life? I haven't been here since I was a kid.
Come visit us.
You were a big part of putting together the Hall of Origins.
The Hall of Human Origins, that's right. Yeah, which is almost 10 years old. Please come visit us. It's still fresh and new and exciting. And
yeah, if you want to get kind of like some real thought out distillation of what we're talking about here, it is there. I have some content we just took from there, and I'll post it up when we post this, so you can kind of see some of that, some pictures, some video of Brianna talking. But come to see this. Bring your kids. Definitely. I know you've done a lot of work with teachers on how to educate on human evolution and things like that. So dive in at your leisure.
Excellent. Please do.
All right. Thanks, Brianna.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I guess I grew up on an older road.
That's it. That's all. Thanks to Brianna. Thanks to Phil, as always. Thanks to all of you for writing in, for listening, for talking to us, for a lot of you are really good writers, and a lot of you are really thoughtful, talented folks. I'm challenged by it as a writer. One thing you need to do, of all the things you might need to do this holiday season, is watch the Back 40. Now, if you don't know what the Back 40 is, go to MeatEaters YouTube channel, find the Back 40, and watch from episode 1 to 5. We've done 5 episodes over this fall, and we just launched episode 6 yesterday. So you got to get over there and watch it. Mark Kenyon killed the White 8 while I was on the property in Michigan with him. It was one of the coolest things I've ever been a part of. I am pretty damn happy with the final product of this episode. We worked hard on it. So I hope you watch episode 6 on MeatEater YouTube channel of the Back 40, and then we have 2 more episodes left in the year. So there's episode 7 and 8 upcoming, where we'll find out more about this buck that Mark Kenyon shot and what's happening on the property. I think they're out there shooting the last episode right now, which is episode 8, and featuring our friend Ryan Callahan. So stick around for all of that on the MeatEater YouTube channel, and you'll be watching Back 40. That's all I got. We got, again, we want to reiterate, we're doing the best of THC. We got 4 shows to fill. So it's going to be a lot of work, so we need your help. THC@themeateater.com. Let us know your favorite moments, your favorite interviews, your favorite people, your favorite jokes, whatever else that you want us to highlight, and we will do it in the coming weeks and months here at THC. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll see you next time.
Stay here too long, 'cause I can't go a week without doing wrong. Oh, without doing wrong. Drinking without doing wrong. Oh, without doing wrong. Drinking in heaven. Sitting as the bar stool starts to grow roots. I'm feeling like an old worn out pair of shoes. Oh, tell me what is it that I should do? I should do. 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 I should.
You ever get that feeling the walls closing in, the concrete jungle suffocating you? You crave some wide open spaces, the chance to connect with nature, maybe in a spot all your own. Well, head over to land.com. They've got ranches, forests, mountains, streams, you name it. Search by acreage. You can search by location. You can search by the kind of hunting and fishing you're dreaming of. Land.com. It is where the adventure begins. After 3 years of work, our follow-up to the Meat Eater Fish and Game Cookbook is here. It's the Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, campfire, and camp stove. Here is your book for everything that's best cooked or eaten outside. From grilling to open fire cooking to Dutch ovens to smokers to barbecue to backpacking meals to how to pull off the perfect fish fry, with pit stops along the way for lessons about Ice Age cooking methods and the best 5 ways to construct a cooking fire you can be proud of. And of course, we're focusing on wild game and fish here with over 100 recipes, including stuffed venison burgers 3 ways, wild duck with ahi verde sauce, a jerky made with cola, a gin and tonic made with fire-charred lemons, and grilled frog legs made with a sticky sweet sauce. This ain't your normal cookbook, so be prepared to be surprised. Get your copy now. For more info, visit themeateater.com or buy it wherever books are sold.